Welcome to Keep Going, a podcast about failure and success, hosted by John Biggs. Every week, we talk to an amazing person about a time they failed and what they learned. And remember, when you're going through hell, keep going.
Welcome back to Keep Going, a podcast about success and failure. I'm John Biggs. Today on the show, we have Ann Carver. She is you're multi-hyphenated. You have a podcast called Let's Get Naked, which is about vulnerability, not what everybody else is thinking. There's a book, The Life Hack Playbook, which is why I originally wanted you on here. And you're an entrepreneur and a self-described rainmaker. So welcome, Ann.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, John.
Yeah. So that's a lot of stuff. So, I mean, it's ironically, that's basically what I do as well. So tell us about tell us about everything, really.
Yeah. Well, I've always come from this place of wanting to do my own hustle. When I was younger and worked for other people, it just felt like, I feel like I could do this way better than what they're doing. And so have always just been a hustler. I have a extremely good work ethic. And so that served me well. Now in my later years, I'm figuring out how to kind of balance that out and give back in the ways that I think are important as far as things that are missions to me, which is kind of where the podcast and the book come in, and trying to figure out the balance. I ran really hard in construction for decades, and obviously that's a very male-dominated industry. So I was very comfortable with my masculine and producing and all of the things that, kind of lead to the masculine side. And now in these later years, I'm figuring out the balance of the feminine side and kind of leaning more into that.
I mean, so I've said all over and over again that this podcast is basically penance for me being a jerk back when I was in the TechCrunch days when I was working on startups. It sounds like you might be in a similar situation. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that masculine side that you had to drum out of yourself?
Yeah, that I had to crucify. Yes. I had a pivot point in my life about a decade ago. You talk about vulnerability. Here's vulnerability talking. I lost my sister very unexpectedly in a tragic way about 10 years ago. I had already been a heavy drinker. Alcohol and I had always been best of friends. And I allowed the last 18 months of my drinking career to kind of just annihilate my life. I didn't know how to deal with grief because I had always been in my masculine. When you're in your masculine, it's very just push those emotions down. We'll numb on top of those. Who was raised in our generation understands, rub some dirt on it. You're going to be fine. I, subscribe to that for sure. So, just now I believe I'm doing the same thing as paying penance for really being in my own head and in my own way for the first several decades of my life. And now I'm doing things that I feel like help, other people. I lead by example with vulnerability on my podcast, and my book is very vulnerable as well, of just kind of sharing some of the things that I've learned along the way that make sense and help me. But yeah, I agree. I think what you're talking about is paying penance for earlier years. I'm doing the same thing.
I mean, it sounds like this is a fairly common pattern, right? You're super intense, working hard in an industry that might be actually antagonistic towards you. And to kind of bury all that, you use booze or you use more work. And then when you come out the other end, right, you're still doing a podcast, you're still doing books, you're still doing consulting, you're still trying to do that hustle. How do you, first off, is what you're doing still healthy? And second off, how did you escape that? How did you escape that? The previous life? How did you escape that first off, the life of boozing and hanging out with dudes, and then that I guess your depths during that 18 months.
Yeah. So, the first question, is it healthy? Yes, in that there's a balance now. I used to work 12, 14 hours a day consistently, and working was definitely my numb of choice in conjunction with alcohol. And so being able to really realize that and be intentional about how I spend my time.
How do you rework yourself after that kind of the doldrums, right? How do you rework yourself after hitting that rock bottom?
Yeah. It's wild to me because so many people put so much energy and effort into other things. If you think about what you put into your work or to other people, we put very little into ourselves. And so it very much was just reframing where I was putting my energy and putting it all in on myself. Because at that point, I got to where I was I was really making a mess of my life with alcohol and work. I wasn't paying attention to my family. I wasn't plugged into the things that were important. For me, my journey ended at rehab and really kind of starting to figure out the reasons that I was drinking and what I was numbing out, starting to really figure those things out and go all in on me. And I took that to a whole new level, because it was the more that I figured out who I was and got the gunk off of the top, the better person I was for my partner, for my kids, for my friends, for myself. And so I have the pedal to the metal for figuring out the things and putting the effort and the energy into myself. It seems really kind of selfish, but when you look at it, it's best for everyone because you're the best version of yourself, which then gets on everybody else instead of coming from this resent-filled place. And so the more that I did, the more that I was addicted to it, the more results that I would see. And now it's just a complete game for me of, turning this life into getting rid of the junk and bringing in the joy and the purpose and the good stuff.
What would you say to somebody who felt that like all of their hard charging, all the drinking, all the whatever is necessary, right?
Mm,
To keep their equilibrium. It sounds like you found your own personal equilibrium,
yeah.
and I think that's vital. But I think somebody in the throes of that would probably be thinking something else, right?
Well, when you get savagely self-aware about what it is that you're doing to yourself, what is alcohol doing? If you feel like you need that, what is that doing for you? Right? Like if I felt like I needed to
Hmm.
work 12 hours a day or I needed to drink when I got home, I'm numbing out my life, right? I'm literally giving myself the fuel to be a zombie in my own life. And I look at that looking back now and it's kind of sad. Obviously, I didn't know any better back then and so I didn't do any better, but looking back, there's no contest on how good life can be if you just get aware of what it is that you're using to numb and then figure out why you're numbing. Right? Because yes, it takes work, but you
Hmm.
put so much work into all of these other things with zero benefit to yourself. Why wouldn't you reframe that so that you're putting work into yourself to be the best version of you so that you don't need to be a workaholic that produces to validate yourself or drink to numb on top of your crappy day. It's a waste of time and something that makes me feel like people are going through life in airplane mode. And when they realize there's so much better out there, like I look back now and I can't even imagine drinking anymore. I spent
Hmm.
decades doing that. I spent decades using that as my numb of choice. People use doom scrolling, TV, food, whatever, right? You pick your numb of choice and then just get into airplane mode and jump in the hamster wheel and get through life. That's not what it's supposed to be. It's way, way better than that. So that's what that's my mission is to tell people like, hey guys, I found a different way. I found a better way, which just sucks the enjoyment out of life instead of just feeling like you're triaging your mediocre life, going through things with, little awareness, little intentionality, not really any goals. I think feel like we were prescribed this life that we're supposed to do. And here's where happiness lives. And here's what success means and handed down those things from either parental or societal conditioning or whatever. And it's like, says who, right? Like you decide for you what's
Hmm.
important. And if those things are important for you, then great. But I spent my life up to 40 figuring out what success was because that was what was prescribed to me. And I got there and that's not where happiness lived. I had the big house and the fancy cars and all of the stuff. And it was like I'd never been more miserable in my life. So, getting intentional about how you want to actually live your life and then taking the steps that it takes to put those things into place, I think is really valuable.
So the subtitle of the book is "Proven Shortcuts to Peace and Purpose," right? So why
Hmm.
don't you talk to us a little bit about what you recommend in the book for
Yeah.
folks who might be going through what you went through?
Yeah. So, first of all, I think understanding that energy is your biggest resource is the biggest component of that because there are a lot of things that take your energy throughout the day, things that are worth it, things that aren't worth it, but that's your resource. So, how you spend it is up to you. And then getting intentional, right? That's kind of the savage self awareness component of it, of getting intentional where you are spending that resource of your energy, what you're fueling with that, and then doing something different about it. Because unless you've lived the best day that you could possibly live yesterday, there's room for improvement and it's worth putting that energy and effort in. So I suggest to people when you get aware of where your energy goes, trading things out. When you have things that you feel drained after you're doing, if it's not something that is giving you any benefit and not something that you have to do, stop doing that, right? And do more things that make you feel energized. That can be, mentally, emotionally, physically. It's all the same energy, but use it with intention to build your life the way that you want it to instead of just feeling like life is happening to you.
How do you avoid the trap of moving one, I mean, we could say addiction, into something else? I mean, I
Yeah.
think this is fairly familiar with folks who like had bariatric surgery, right? You lose a bunch of weight and you're fascinated by food, and then you move into something that's completely different. Workaholism or something else.
Yeah. Well, you're numbing the same thing, right? So like, it doesn't matter what the numb is. Very easy when you quit drinking to like, okay, I could have very easily turned into food as my numb of choice because that's something that's very acceptable in my family. Everyone, a lot of them are overweight and all of the things. So I very easily could have done that. And also I switched off a little bit to a nice little sugar addiction that I had to work through as well. So, the reasons why we do those things are going to be there regardless. And so you have to figure out what those are. I didn't just drink for no reason. There were reasons underneath that I started drinking when I was 13 years old and that felt like home and that felt very comforting and very numbing. But when you do that, you're literally just setting your life on autopilot and then what you get is what you get. And if that's okay with you, then excellent, keep doing that. But for those people that are out there that are searching for something more, that feel like this hamster wheel that I'm on where I feel drained all the time, this life that I live where everyone's robbing your attention and you're not able to focus on what your goals are or being at peace. There's work to be done there, but that work is definitely worth it. And you have the capability and the power to be able to do those things and make those changes for yourself.
So you're talking quite a bit about the idea of numbing. How do you know in the throes of one of these experiences, how do you know that you're numb, right? I think a lot of people who are super busy or super moving through, they might feel like an inkling, but they don't feel it to the degree that they need to make a major change, right?
Yeah. It's easier obviously to see in hindsight, so now after I've kind of noticed where I was numbing out, it's very easy to tell. But if you're in a place where you're sitting here thinking there's got to be something more, where you think this can't be everything that is life, this doesn't feel like, like everything it's supposed to be, you're not wrong, right? There's a reason why you have that feeling or that nudge. And so getting curious about that, because putting your phone down, going for a walk in silence, let your mind actually catch up to you for a minute, you'll realize how much time we spend numbing. We are a society of numbers. There's a plethora of things that we can use to just completely numb out. But what that does is it numbs out your emotions. It numbs out how you're in tune with yourself. It numbs out your intuition. Those are our things that we came into this world with. Those are ours to have, but we've just put so much gunk over top of them that we don't feel like we have direction. We don't feel like we have purpose. So really, it is a work of kind of getting very curious about that in your own life and figuring out what needs to happen to do the work. Everybody's so individual because they have their own things. But if you didn't address things that happened to you, maybe it was trauma or other things in your upbringing, if you didn't address those things, those are still there. They're just now invisible weights that you carry around and you're bleeding in the dark. And so if you don't realize that, then you don't realize that, but you're missing out on all of the goodness in life by not doing that work on yourself and really figuring out what you can do to live your best life.
What did you do 10 years ago to fix things? You said you were in that 18-month spiral, right? What was the day that you realized that it was time to change?
For me, I just got to where I was so tired of the hamster wheel. I was drinking every single day and I got to where it was like, I can't do this anymore. I was not the person that I was proud of. I had a hard time looking myself in the mirror. And so for me, I went to rehab and when I went to rehab, my eyes were open to so many different things. And so, I was already in therapy because of my sister passing away. So really just doubling down on that and figuring out what that looked like, what makes me feel better, what work do I need to do? Again, we put so much into other things that don't have nearly as much significance or importance. You're the most important thing for you. So figuring out, for me, it was therapy, it was yoga, it was fitness, it was, just a combination of things, journaling and getting a gratitude journal process. So it is a lot of things that you just have to really focus on what it is that you need to kind of heal any trauma that you had. The combination is different, but there's a ton of tools out there for people to be able to use no matter what resource level you're in. I read a lot of books. I listened to a lot of podcasts, just figuring out how to stop numbing because we do it so easily, so often that you don't even recognize you're doing it.
What's the quickest and easiest way? I mean, obviously everybody's that's a ridiculous question to ask, but if you're in the throes of this, you're constantly working 24/7, right? So what's the quickest and easiest way to figure out what's numbing you and to
Yeah. I would get real curious about how you use things in life, right? So if you're a big TV watcher, start writing down how much time of your week you spend watching TV. If you're on your phone a lot and you're a doom scroller, get curious about how much time that is. Because if you don't have an awareness of where you're spending your time, you don't have an awareness of where there's room for improvement. So That's the biggest component of it. Start writing down pros and cons, lists of pros and cons for things that you do in life and what value they bring. So a lot of people have a hard time with alcohol because they think, oh, well, that's what I use to kind of unwind at the end of the day, right? Make a list of what that is so that you're looking yourself in the mirror and understanding the impact that that has on your life, no matter what it is, right? If it's food, if it's any of the things, get real with yourself, because again, you're the only one that's the direct benefactor of your improvements for things. So you can go ahead and continue to just live your life the exact same way. But if you're not happy or you see that there's room for improvement, start looking, right? Look under the rug, put your phone down. You have to get quiet before you won't be able to see it. So you can't say like, oh, I don't have time, but then go ahead and go look in that screen time app on your phone. And if you're spending a bunch of hours on your phone every day, I don't do the excuse of no time. And you shouldn't do the excuses to yourself anyways, right? That's part of the savage self-awareness of really being able to look and say, I spent 3 hours today on Instagram. That's a part-time job, so you can't say like, oh, I don't have time for something. And also you can't say, well, that was my self-care or I was just, unplugging. No, because social media makes 0 people feel better about themselves after they do it. So it's like, again, that savage self-awareness of what value is this adding to my life? You have to be willing to look yourself in the mirror, no matter what that takes.
Well, I've seen plenty of little videos of cute possums, so I feel like those have improved my life immeasurably.
Well, it's great that you say that because my husband watches those, the inflatable, the inflatable suits and then someone farting into them. And he's like, this is hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, that's worth it.
Solid.
That's worth it. It's solid gold.
Solid comedy. Yeah, we're really. Okay. First off, how can people get in touch with you? How can do you help folks? Do you help folks out and when they're in this sort of situation?
The book and the podcast is the way that I've been drawn to help folks out, and then just people that are at my table of life. If you get the benefit of having me at your table, I'm happy to be part of the solution. But you can find me at Let's Get Naked podcast, where again we talk about all the things vulnerable, all of the things that are messy that people sometimes don't want to talk about, but really are important. I have a website, anncarber.com. You can find my book, The Life Hack Playbook, on Amazon or any of the other online retailers that you find your books. And again, just get curious. Get curious about yourself and your day and what you're doing. That's the first start.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us. This has been, I think, probably one of the first times we talked about alcohol on here, which is good. I think that's another
Excellent.
thing that folks are maybe they're replacing with psilocybin or something like that. But maybe
Sure.
that's more useful to folks. Anyway,
Right.
Ann, thank you for joining us. This has been fascinating.
Absolutely. Thanks, John.
This has been Keep Going. I'm John Biggs. We'll see you next week. Welcome back to Keep Going, a podcast about success and failure. I'm John Biggs. Today on the show, we have Bobby Mascia. He's an author, and he's also the founder of Green Ridge Wealth Planning and the Mascia Capital Group. Welcome, Bobby.
Hey, John. How are you? Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So I was interested in you. You basically wrote a book called Unchained, which is the raw truth about entrepreneurship, family, business. Leadership, is there a comma in there?
Family, business, and life balance.
All right. So you recently wrote a book called Unchained. It's the raw truth about entrepreneurship, family, business, and life balance. And I think one of the things that we focus on here is life balance, which is one thing that entrepreneurs don't have, and is what's actively hurting a lot of them. So why don't you talk a little bit about what you wrote?
Yeah. So my background of what I've been through over the past 27 years in life led me to read this book, and it was really one pivotal moment. And it was after my father had died, and I had to buy the businesses for my mother. Start a family office while I was still running the business that I had founded 10 years prior. For the first year of going through what I had gone through, I had just a moment, one of those light bulb moments where I was like, my story can help a lot of people. And I can either continue to help just the clients that I'm bringing on into Green Ridge Wealth Planning, or I can expand my reach and really make a difference. So that's when I wrote the book. And, it really talks about, and I'm sure you have some people here, whether or not they're in a family business or they're thinking about their kids and potentially incorporating their kids into the business, or they're not even sure, but they may or may not, right? I came out of Wall Street and got into the one place that I never wanted to be. At the time, my father was franchising Dunkin' Donuts and Baskin Robbins, had about 20 locations. And 9/11 happened. That was the first domino. I was going back for my MBA and CFA, and at the same time working full time down on Wall Street, and a little stressed out. And my parents could see it on my face, especially since after that happened, It wasn't like work from home today, right? We didn't have the opportunity to jump on a Zoom call and be productive with shared drives and everything in the cloud. There was no cloud. So it was a really weird dynamic. Fast forward, my mother went in for open heart surgery. Fast forward even further, my father went in for open heart surgery. I'm a big family guy. I'm an Irish Italian guy from New Jersey. So when my family needed me, it was something that had been always ingrained in me. Family first, like family first. So my dad had said, hey, listen, I need you to come in. It's going to be great. And I said, I don't know if it's going to be great, but I'll come in and I'll help. And over the 9 years, we grew it from 20 to 40 locations. But the same reason I didn't want to be in the business was the same reason that brought me out. But I learned a lot in that time. Number one, hindsight being 2020, I learned that sometimes life throws you weird curveballs that you think are taking you completely off path, when in reality, it's just giving you that next set of experiences to set you up for success later on. And I think you talk about failures a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's been my general mindset on failures. But there's a lot of weird dynamics that happen inside family businesses, and my aunts and uncles were involved. So there was some posturing of, oh, here comes the proverbial son coming in to take over the business, or think he's taking over the business. There were some histories with other family members that had left the business, fractured the business. So, there were some scars that were developed. My dad was very old school, patriarchal, my rules, and these are my rules, except I'm going to change my rules whenever I want to change my rules. And then you follow those rules. So, after I had my second son, my father's mentality also was, doesn't matter about how smart you work. If you're not putting in the hours, you're not working hard enough. And that grit, that grit is something that you need to get things going. And, Angela Duckworth says, one of the number one determinant of whether or not somebody's going to be successful, grit. But what I've learned over the years is that grit needs to get refocused from on your business when you're working in your business, from when you're working and building something, to on your business. And we didn't do a lot of that. And that was frustrating. So when I left and I started my own firm, I actually got back into finance on the other side, cut my teeth, got my designations, decided that I wanted no conflicts. I wanted to give real advice. And I found myself opening up this firm with nothing, right? Coming out of the family business, it wasn't like I came with a whole bunch of money. I was, for all intents and purposes, I was partially an indentured servant.
Okay.
My buddies that graduated college that were on Wall Street or off Wall Street, they were all making 3 or 4x what I was making. And here I was with a son and a newborn son. And my wife said to me, you look miserable and I love you. And I don't care if we have to sell the house and we have to move into a condo. You need to do you. And this is not you. And my wife's smarter than me. I mean, she went to Washington University, St. Louis. She worked at McKinsey. She's, definitely the brains in the family, bigger brains in the family. I shouldn't say the brains. She's just bigger brains. And that impacted me a lot. So, like I said, I founded this business, started from nothing, and had to really establish a foundation by creating new networks and talking to new people, because all the people who were in my networks already were like, what are you, crazy? You're leaving your family business to go and start this? You'll be back. There's no way you can walk away from something like that. And I was like, no, I got a chip on my shoulder. Like most people who are successful, that chip is not going away. I gotta keep going. And my father and I did not speak for the first year that I left. Same room, don't say a word to each other. Sees his grandkids, don't say a word to each other. And that was hard. But what ended up happening was when I started to get rid of the resentment that I had toward my experiences, and I started focusing on my business and growing my business. Dad had brothers and sisters in the business, nieces and nephews that he was responsible for. Everybody he looked at, he was like, I have to take care of these people. Mm-hmm. Now, all of a sudden, the son that left his business is super successful, expanded on his house, starts buying nice cars. He's like, what are you doing? So I think that when he realized that I started to become successful on my own right, it changed the conversation. And when you say about the successes and the failures, we've kind of worked through some things that he was doing, and it was short lived because he ended up passing. And then there's a whole story that I go into in my book of what we've done, what we've been through, and the conversations and the lessons learned and all that fun stuff.
So this is This is an interesting story because this comes from a different place than most entrepreneurs. I mean, you basically had a business that was there waiting for you, right? It's the proverbial mom and pop shop, and they wanted you to sit behind the counter and sell the donuts or whatever. And you jumped out. What is your advice for folks who are in that situation where they are kind of like making a lot less because it's a bunch of dry cleaners, or it's a family restaurant that is constantly on the teetering on the edge? As an Irish Italian, and you said you have a family, you have how do you basically break it to the folks that you don't want to, I don't know, fry schnitzel all day?
So John, you know what's interesting, and maybe I'm overgeneralizing, but it seems that the people who are most trying to figure themselves out become therapists. The people who maybe have an illness become experts in a specific field of medicine. People tend to look in at what they have experienced or need and tend to go and find the resolution and become experts in it, so to speak. Not always. As I said this was an overgeneralization. I think I planted that seed. But I left my family business. I started working with entrepreneurs, and two of the designations that I got was succession planning and certified family business specialist. And I've really done a lot of work and additional schooling and education and to really understand what is a healthy way to manage a family business, whether or not you're the upcoming generation or the outgoing generation or the operational generation to an incoming generation. There's a skill and there's an art and there's a set of really important tools that you can incorporate. I think one of the biggest things that will answer your question, though, is my belief is there's two really important things to a successful relationship. Number one is communication. Number two is transparency. And when I look back at my experience in my family business, communication and transparency were broken. I had forged my own expectations of what I thought I was going to get out of being in this family business. My dad had his own expectations. My aunts and uncles had their own expectations. Those expectations were never communicated. There was no clear and transparent road for me to meet those expectations because we didn't even share what they are. I just thought that eventually I was going to take it over. He thought that eventually he might retire. And when he believed that I was ready to take on more, he would give more. But that's not a plan. That's not even a sketch of a plan.
Exactly.
So the more and more everybody starts to have these expectations, self-expectations or believed expectations, time goes by like concrete, it gets harder and harder and harder until it just becomes something that you're not going to mold and change. It's unbreakable. And I think that's where a lot of the problems lie. So number one, we never had a conversation that didn't conflate every role that we had as people. So I give you a for instance, right? You and I are brothers. You're the CEO of the firm. I'm the marketing guy. And I say to you, John, I got this great idea. This is what we need to do. I think it's going to be fantastic for the business. We should plow ahead. I got a team ready to go, and I'm excited. This is going to be fantastic. And you say, Bobby, listen, that's really not in direct alignment with where we are as a business. I don't know if that's the best idea. What do you mean it's not the best idea, John? John, we're 50-50 partners. I don't care if you believe that this is the best idea. I have a voice at the table. This is something that I want to do. Yeah, Bobby, I hear you, but I don't know if it's in direct alignment with what we're trying to do as a company. And regardless of 50-50 partners, who's making these decisions? John, this is the same crap that you did to me when we were kids. You tried to play the older brother card and you're holding me down and I've got these great ideas and you never take me seriously. Right there, we didn't establish is the conversation between CEO and CMO?
CMO, yeah.
Is the conversation between 50-50 equity partners? Is the conversation older brother to younger brother?
Yeah, and you're holding them down and smacking them in the head or whatever, right? So it's kind of interesting.
And we conflated all three of those roles. Whereas we may have had a better conversation if we said, hey, John, I got this great idea. And you say, okay, are you coming to me as big brother, little brother? Are we chatting this out as though we were sitting and having a beer? Are you talking to me like I'm CEO and I'm the one who's going to make the ultimate decision and you're going to pitch it to me as CMO? Or are we having this conversation as 50-50 partner? And I say, you know what? I want to pitch it to you. We're having this as CEO, CMO. Okay, great. Let's go. The minute I start talking about 50-50 partners or equity, or the minute I start talking about brotherhood is the minute that we have to the other person has to clearly say, hey, listen, hold on. That's a different conversation. We're not wearing those hats right now. Let's have this conversation. to where we're playing our roles accordingly. If it needs to change into a different conversation, we can change it at a different conversation at another time. But right now, this is the conversation we decided to have, so let's have it. And it's amazing how just creating some boundaries establishes a real pathway to success in communicating and being transparent.
I mean, that seems like that's generally useful tactic, right? We're CMO, CEO. Maybe we started the startup together, and we're always going to be in that 50-50. Maybe we didn't take baths together as kids, but we did deal with that stuff. I think there's the one point that you had was like sort of like this idea of disappointment, right? And this happens a lot when it comes to high achieving folks. Maybe mom wanted you to be a lawyer or a doctor, and you I don't know, did a STEM teaching service or something like that. You decided to build something instead. How do you route around that issue where, first off, you feel bad because you're disappointing dad in your case to a degree, and then how do you sort of retrain somebody who isn't ready for your entrepreneurial ideas?
And that's the format of, well, what does the relationship look like? And what does everybody want out of the relationship? Because I think that most of the time people want a good relationship with their kids. They want a good relationship with their parents. They want a successful outcome. They want to see what is best for each party. And being in alignment, sometimes not being alignment, you can be aligned on not being in alignment. So you can say, okay, this isn't the path for you. There's another path for you. And that's okay. Now, what do we do? Choose your own adventure. But if you can't be in alignment that's okay first and foremost, well, then there's a whole therapy session that we would need to have to go through in order to understand where that stems from and how we might be able to change some of the perspectives in the room.
And how do you get cranky old dad to go to therapy, or is that even doable?
So what's interesting in the space right now is that we have two tides that are ready to crash. In 2030, every baby boomer is going to be over the age of 65, right? Typical retirement age, 65 is one of those, moments in life where we've identified that that's an important age, directly related to retirement. The second thing is AI is set to reach singularity. So these two things colliding at the same time. And I don't know about you, but I know when the iPhone came out in 2005, my mother still does not know how to use an iPhone. She's had one for the better part of a decade. She still fumbles with, how do I do these things? Not because she's not smart, not because she's not capable. She's just not interested because it's not part of what she grew up around. There are a lot of older people who if it's not something that they've relied upon, or if they look to the future and go like, hey, you know what? I'm too old. I'm not going to become an expert in this. It's not going to change my life. I don't have this high level of interest. They're not going to engage and initiate with technology. So what's going to happen? Right now, 20% of businesses that go up for sale actually make it to the closing table. 80% failure. Most because of lack of preparedness for sale, because they aren't transferable. They're too owner reliant, or the owner just wants too much they think their business is worth more than it really is, and they're not willing to part with it. So you look at look at AI coming in. If you're not going to be adapting AI, how much more are you going to get your lunch eaten with the value of your business being taken advantage of? I think most people, when they get to the age and they have to start thinking about the future, and they're staring down the barrel of all of these statistics that are really failure statistics of people putting the right things in place and planning and preparing, it's not because you can't run a business. It's because you don't know what you don't know. And that's something that you typically want to educate yourself on, but you're too busy running your business. When dad realizes that there's an opportunity for his business to lose value, to not be transferable or sellable, losing money, not fulfilling his obligation as a family, like there's certain people feel like there's something that they identify in there with their business and what it does for their family that has to resonate with them to be ready to make change.
Interesting. Going back to the AI thing, it sounds like, well, first off, you're in wealth management, right? So at this point, to a degree, you could be replaced by AI, who's going to tell you to do X, Y, and Z, but it's not really there yet. Lawyers are kind of in trouble. Is there any benefit to doing what your dad did and buying a bunch of Dunkin' Donuts franchises, or is there any benefit to opening a food truck in a world of AI, especially if you're a quote unquote white collar worker or a knowledge worker?
I think you have to really think about what your belief system is around AI in your industry. And the one thing that I would encourage you to not do is put your head under a rock and hope that everything is going to be okay. Now, is AI going to replace everything that you do? Probably not. right? There's a human element. There's two human elements at play. Number one is people need community. They need to be around people. They need to talk things through. That's number one. Number two is we as humans have a certain speed in which we are capable to evolve. We cannot go from where we are today to a completely automated society where everyone's going to live in harmony. Money's not going to exist. Everybody's going to have free time because the robots are doing everything for us. And we're going to be okay with that. So there's going to be an evolutionary phase. And I think that doing a real deep dive, and whether or not that's a little self-introspection and trying to think about what it is that your business is and what your purpose is out there in life, what it is that you love to do and how you want to change the world, but also talking to other people that are in your space or in different spaces that are complementary to you and getting a pulse is going to be huge. And if you're purely just looking at like, what is it that I need to do that's going to be AI proof? I don't think we're going to be AI proof, but whenever you're talking, touching, and people need that dynamic, you're probably going to be in a safer space than most. So you're, for instance, you own a wealth management firm. Now we do customized portfolio management. Can that be taken over by AI at some point? Yeah, that's not really where we hold the biggest value. We do a really good job. We don't shortcut it, but our value is our ability to really understand our clients and help them navigate through some of the really difficult moments where there are these interpersonal or big decisions or challenges that they have to overcome that just inputting into AI isn't going to give them the answer. And where our value prop really is in that planning. So, I told you about Unchained. I wrote the book and it became something that was a little bit cathartic, but also something that I wanted to put out there to the world. In that process, in my process of working with a number of entrepreneurs and business owners as clients and going back and doing all of my other education, and I like to say I eat my own food. We do a really good job. I have 5 businesses. Now, the wealth management takes about 80% of my time, but the reason I have those 5 businesses is when I took over my dad's business, at that time, I had created a business that had become almost self-managing. The financial planning firm really only needed about 20% of my time. It didn't need the 100%. So I could redivert some of my energy in the short term of a year and a half to get that all squared away before I refocus my energy back to running my business. There are skills that I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I don't claim to be, but I've been around a lot of people who are smarter than I am, more successful than I am. And I've started to gather a lot of that information. And I've been using that information for years that has ultimately led to my success. I package that into a thing called Exit Ready Institute for the firm. Exit Ready Institute is for somebody who's focused on improving the operations, making themselves self-managed, and being ready for exit, whether or not it's in 12 months or 12 years. And that I'm using AI to help me to get that to the right population of business owners. But business owners still want that community effect. They still want to be in the cohort talking to the 14 other business owners that are going through similar issues. They want to go through what we've created from a plan, from a education planning perspective, and they want to ask their questions and have somebody work things through with them that isn't a robot on the other side. I don't think we've gotten there to where we feel this fulfilling relationship through robot interaction or AI interaction the same way that we do with people.
Okay, I like that answer because that's, like a sort of a cynical person would be say like open a funeral home. But what you say is open something where you do have to talk to people, where as a lawyer, the real trick is to get people sitting in front of you and answering their questions. And the AI can do all kinds of things like do all your documentation, but to like make somebody who's in the middle of grief understand estate planning is pretty important.
Yeah, John, I went through I think this, this is also an important part of it is I went through this class. I took, it's heroic public speaking. It's Michael and Amy Port, they're former actors. And he started doing some public speaking. And then all of a sudden people started coming up to him being like, can you show me what it is that you do for public speaking? Because you're amazing at it. And really, it's a performative art. There are people who go up and they do public speaking and they just talk. And then there are people who go up and they do public speaking and they perform. So I found that to be fascinating. And I took that class, and it was a performance class of how to really talk to people where they're engaged in what it is that you have to say and they're captivated and you're getting your message across. So I came back and I was like, my kids need to learn how to do this. And I started to think about things a little bit differently from the AI perspective, in the sense of like, what are people really going to value and need? And if you think about some of the hard skills you have to know. Even though AI is going to do it, you have to know it, because you have to know whether or not AI is wrong, hallucinating, miscalculating, whatever the case is. If you can't logically think through issue spotting and identifying where there might be an issue, you're going to be at a disadvantage. But also the things that, from a cultural and a sophistication perspective, the arts, the ideas behind the sciences, the communication skills, I think those are going to be much more valuable than they were. So like a sociology class was always like, sociology, I guess I need 3 more credits. Let me just take that. I think sociology is going to be more of, you know what, let me get a little bit deeper into that so I can understand how people think, so I can bring that human element in a way that hasn't been brought before in my industry or, whatever business I have.
I like that. I like that a lot. So I want people to look for you so they can find you at bobbymasha.com.
Yeah. I'm all over social media. I've got Business Unchained podcast. My book's on Amazon. If I get into your feed, you may never get rid of me.
All right, so don't follow him anywhere.
No, I'm just kidding.
Just read the book. Business Unchained is the podcast, which just looks really cool. And anything else? Are you working on anything new books?
No, the book writing process was really interesting. It took me about 18 months to put it together. I always wondered, I don't know if there's other people who thought like, I want to write a book, like I should write a book, or what is writing a book going to do for my business? I always thought about it, but I never had anything that really compelled me to go pen to paper. Everything that I started to go pen to paper with, I'm like, how many freaking books do we need? Like the same stupid messages, like the same bullshit. Like, sorry, I didn't.
It's all right. So this is an NPR.
Who needs more of this? But when I had that story of my life story, the memoir that had a lot of business advice baked in, and I felt like I was helping somebody, I was compelled to do it. So I think unless there's something that's going to compel me pen to paper again, I probably won't do it. But right now it's really this Exit Ready Institute. I'm super pumped about it. And I think that we could change a lot of business owners' lives in 12 months of just getting the basic foundational components together. And then ultimately, and it's like anything else. Like, we're going to try to make you more wealthy, so that's where you can actually go into our wealth management practice. So I think that, from a direct alignment, like, am I engaging in something that's a bag of goods and I'm not going to get what I want at the end? Well, that just hurts us. Like, we're looking to make you more money. We're looking to get you more wealthy, so that this way you can come. So
you can manage it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think from a self-serving perspective or a mutual serving perspective, it's exciting for me, and I think that a lot of people are going to benefit from it. And I'm excited.
All right. Well, Bobby, thank you for this. This has been amazing insight, because I've literally never talked to anybody like you on here. Everybody else is just building something like whole cloth, and you had something that you had to take care of, and you succeeded after it, which is really great.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. That's you made my day. That was awesome. Thank you.
Oh wow, yeah. Nobody says nice things to anybody anymore. So there you go. There's your nice thing for the day. This has been Keep Going. I'm John Biggs. We will see you next week. Thank you for listening to Keep Going, a podcast about success and failure. Remember, Keep Going is entirely listener supported. If you're listening to this, please head over to keepgoingpod.com, where you can subscribe to the podcast for as little as $5 a month. This is a labor of love, and every little bit helps. Thanks for listening.